Okay, hello everybody, this is January 21st, and this is the OLM Development Feature Planning meeting, and today we're going to be discussing the proposal to better capture what is included with each release of OpenShift, with each release of the Operator Lifecycle Manager. So, just going to pull up the agenda right now. We can see here, Camellia had actually proposed this internally. And she requested that we update the OLM PRs to include a template that is used to generate a change log in between releases. And if we look at this proposed template, it is already in use by the SDK team. You'll see here that there's a description for the changes being introduced. It has a depiction of what that actual change is. So we have an addition, a change, a deprecation, removal, or bug fix. And then it includes whether or not this is a breaking change. So it will better communicate when things aren't going to continue working as expected with a change, as well as some other information that you can kind of see down here. And the idea is that if a PR is created and it fills out this template, with each OLM release, we would be able to generate a very clear depiction of what has changed between each version of OLM and what's currently available. It would be pretty easy. We just have to update the actual template that's generated whenever somebody creates a pull request to include this new template. And I think this would give our users a much better experience in terms of actually knowing like, oh, this feature is available in this version of OLM Upstream, and then this feature is not available, because right now it's kind of, you have to look at the actual code itself or review the commit messages in order to identify that. So I wanted to just get this in front of people so that we could decide whether or not this is the correct path forward. And the best mechanism for that might be to create an issue against GitHub proposing these template changes so that we can collect any additional feedback from the community that they may want captured.
Looks awesome. I'm up for anything that helps me know what's in each version without having to look through a list of PRs or commits.
Okay. In that case, I'm actually going to just create a PR or an issue against OLM right now, so that we can capture this and then hopefully track it. So I think that's one thing we need to do better. We just need to actually create the issues in real time. So I'm just going to create this. So we'll put under feature request. Oh, this is against the Operator SDK, sorry.
Someone needs any help to understand, I will see if I will be able to collaborate with that. I will try, I promise. But if someone trying to do that and needs any help to understand, feel free to ping me as well. I can help.
I can actually hear who was just talking. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you better now, but it was difficult to hear you earlier.
Okay, so I will try to help on that. But if someone has time to work on this before and has any problem, any doubt, feel free to ping in myself as well, and I'll be happy in help.
Okay. Sorry, I do not know why, but I cannot hear you at all. Could anybody hear that can repeat that for me so I don't miss that?
Can you hear me, Alex?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I think Camilla was just saying that she could try to help with this, but if anybody has time and or needs questions or anything like that, just feel free to reach out to her.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Great. Template. And okay. And I'll just add you as an assignee and look. Okay, feature requests. Which features are available in each. And I think we already actually have a commit message, so I'd rather just look at what the change log looks like right now to refresh my memory. Okay. So right now it just is generated off of the commit, the top level commit message. It looks the commit header. So currently OLM's change log.md is generated. Okay, and I can go beyond this later and update it so that it, to make sure that it's fully represents the requested change. But I think this does a good job of capturing it at a high level. It's currently. Okay, cool. So I'll just submit this issue, and this should do a better job of getting the information to the upstream community in regards to what's actually in each version of OpenShift. Or sorry, Operator Lifecycle Manager. Cool. And going back to this, we have, I'll click this issue. And next, we had something from James asking us to look at adding the E2E test and wondering if we need issues for the work first steps instance.
That'll be John Hunkins, not James.
Yeah, this is, yep, sorry, this is John Hunkins, yep.
Oh, sorry.
So we've been looking at trying to create some new end-to-end tests to cover some of the cases that we've actually have internally. And one of the first things I was looking at was like how to run the end-to-end test framework in a way that allowed you to, to target specific Ginkgo BDD tests. And right now it looks like the mechanism that's in place doesn't allow for that. I think when it got converted, looking through the history, it looked like the code was modified to use Ginkgo, but didn't actually, you lost the ability to individually specify one specific test if you want to concentrate on one particular part. So I was thinking that there's like a kind of a two-stage approach here. One seems to be make changes to the make file to allow for being able to specify Ginkgo specific test cases, and then to actually write the tests.
Got it. Yeah. So right now I get around this just by, changing it to fdescribe or fit in the actual code that I'm trying to run and test, but it would be nicer if you could do that via the command line. Is this a change that you want to actually make and introduce that, you can specify via the, at the make file level, which test you want to run?
Yes, I was thinking about modifying the make targets to allow for, because right now it currently looks like it expects a go test, to specify the individual test, but that only specified. But the way that things were modified, it looks to me like it's actually only using. It only narrows it down to run this particular test, but because you've moved to Ginkgo, the test runner actually uses, is actually invoking Ginkgo to actually do the work. And so there aren't any traditional Go tests anymore. It's just like the main test main, and there's one other test one that runs end to end. So, I mean, the point here is that the mechanism for the make targets don't actually allow you to specify a more granular way to say, okay, I want to run this particular DDD test.
Got it. And you're suggesting, so I'm not too familiar with the actual Ginkgo commands that you can run, but I would suspect that it's relatively easy to update the make file so that you pass the test that you want to run into it, so that it only runs that subset of tests.
Yeah. So that's what I'm probably looking at. Yeah, that's like probably the first PR is to fix or to change that behavior. So, and then move on to actually writing the actual tests. So that's my thinking of what I would want to do. So
yeah, I fully support that. Does anybody have any objections? Evan, I saw you unmute.
Yes, no objections. I just wanted to mention that there are a couple of things you can do already to focus tests with Ginkgo. One is any given spec that you want to run, you can prefix it with a capital F in the code, and then the next time you run Ginkgo, it'll only run that focused test. If you don't want to do that though, we have essentially a newer next version of the makefile that's just called x.mk in the repo, and so that hasn't all. So there's still like a couple of questions about how we want to. It's been around for a year now, so we might as well just move it all into the main makefile. But it has a different way to run the tests, and it has this. It accepts a test invariable that does focusing in Ginkgo as well. So both of those are options we can use today. But I agree that all that should probably be back in the main makefile now.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, because I thought, because it seemed like on the surface, I haven't actually gone through the whole process of actually, to execute it to make sure that it actually does what I want. But I'm thinking that if you do -ginkgo.focus, I think that would actually allow you to supply a regex to the underlying Ginkgo infrastructure to tell it to run this particular test. Whatever one that you're trying to target. Without that way, you don't have to go modify the code to actually specify it. You just specify it in the make target. And away you go.
Yep, that's what the x.mk makefile does with the test flag. It passes it to the Ginkgo specifier.
Oh, okay. So you're basically saying that there's something that's already existing. It just hasn't been migrated into your current make targets.
Yeah, the x.mk file. I think that was the file you were talking about, right, Evan?
Yeah, that's the preview of future makefile commands. This is something that Ben Luddy wrote a while ago, and then we were a little unsure that we wanted to go all in on kind at the time. But my feeling is that that's not a controversial thing anymore. So probably just put it in the main thing.
Okay, so I'm just gonna.
It'd be interesting to know what branch that's on or where that's at, so I could actually poke at that too, just to see what.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say I just added a link to it in the agenda, so it might be good to take a look at the x.mk file. So you can now immediately get to it.
Okay.
And then Evan, is the idea that we should just fully switch over, or we should just rip out the bits for the E2E local to use this? Or how do you suggest we move forward?
I think we can just swap out. I can't remember a reason why we wouldn't want to just swap out E2E local for this thing. The only exception I can think is that we have these other commands in the main makefile called E2E bear. I think I might have been the only one that ever used those, but it spins up the operator locally and points it at a cluster, so that if you want to like set a breakpoint while running against a cluster, you can. I don't know if anyone else does that, but that part hasn't been converted over to work with the new E2E local that's in x.mk. But I think we can leave that alone and just pull in the new E2E local stuff and call it a day.
So to also just to get a better idea then, so should I create a work item or like a feature request or something like that to cover this, or you just accept pull requests and
I don't think you need an issue, if it's just Evan, do we require an issue for something like that? It seems relatively small.
I mean, yeah, I think that's
I would say just open the PR straight up. There's no reason to, because this is just a development enhancement thing that doesn't impact anything to do with the product itself. So we just open the PR and review and merge again.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and as soon as you make that PR, we'll comment on the PR when we can actually pull it in. Cool. Awesome. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is submitted by Chris on requesting an update for the declarative index enhancement. So I'm just going to open that up really quickly.
Yeah, sorry, I just added that. I saw this meeting was canceled. Google Docs must have unsynchronized things.
Oh, sorry. No, that was my mistake. So Dan Solver is taking over leading the Upstream meetings, but I had noticed that you had added something for the next feature planning meeting, and I hadn't canceled the meeting yesterday, so I decided just to go ahead with it. So there was a miscommunication there. So
that's okay.
Apologies about that.
James, let me know this is still going on. So that's all good. So yeah, over the past several months, we've been talking about this set default channel thing, which has been haunting me forever. And unfortunately, I couldn't go to the meeting last Thursday, and then it was closed, and then I kind of suggested we reopen it, and maybe it gets closed by this thing ultimately. So I saw that in the next milestone, this PR or this issue is there for the next one. So I guess that's 1.16. And that's the only thing in that milestone. And then last week we talked about having this capability potentially coming soon, but the enhancement PR is still open. So I'm just kind of wondering what the status of that is, and when do you start wanting to get some feedback on that, and do you want some collaboration on how that's going to work?
So the moment that the enhancement exists, we would love as much feedback and collaboration as we can get, so that the enhancement is.
So what do you mean exists? It's in a PR. Sorry. So it's in a PR right now, which is not merged, so it doesn't really exist yet.
Right. Sorry. I meant that as soon as the PR for the enhancement exists, that is at the community's queue to start commenting on that PR, so that we can make sure that the enhancement covers all the use cases that we hope that we consider upfront but might have missed, right? And so that would be like the ideal time to start getting involved in terms of like leading how that's going to be implemented. So just review the PR and comment on it. In terms of when that PR is actually going to be merged, that it's case by case basis. Like we don't have like we don't have like a set timeline for merging enhancement PRs at this time. Typically it's we wait until it's perfect, quotation marks, before we merge. So we collect all feedback, and then with the person who opened the PR generally tries to drive it to make sure that anybody who comments on the PR is heard, and then we drive it to closure. And then once there's seemingly no more discussion on like what needs to be changed to the PR, it's merged. I know Kevin can confirm this, but this enhancement is planned to be worked on in the next operator lifecycle manager release. Kevin, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like if you take a look at the enhancement that's open right now, there's a bunch of very active comments on it. We're trying to sort of settle in on one specific implementation and then kind of go from there. Like I think this is like a very high priority thing that we're all actively looking at and working on. What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought completely. I apologize. I think, we are going to try our best to make sure that this gets included in the next release. It's like I hesitate to say it will, because I don't like to promise that certain features will make certain releases. But that's like our highest priority item, at least on the registry side. So my expectation is that work is going to actively start on this very, very soon. The other thing I want to mention is I don't think we have an agenda item for it today, but we were talking about having a much more explicit, strict process for enhancement proposals, specifically to get the upstream community more involved in what that process actually looks like. I don't know if I have anything to present right now because we're still talking about what it looks like, but something along the lines of like, once an initial proposal gets acted by one of the approvers, we'll basically just send a message on the mailing list, says like, hey, this has a 1-week comment period. If there are no like big problems from that comment period, it's going to get merged in that time frame. So I think hopefully this is one of the enhancements that will get piloted on whatever process we look like for that. And in the next couple of weeks, we should see that happen.
Yeah. And once the enhancement is merged and the team starts working on it, we do try and update the milestones for the operator lifecycle manager GitHub repository. We update the milestones to actually include what's going to be in the next upstream release, so that there's some visibility and tracking. And once it's in there, that means we're actively trying to get it into OLM. So, enhancements, it's the time to comment. And then when it's in the milestone, we do our best to actually deliver the feature and not remove it from the milestone. So
yeah, this particular one doesn't seem like this affects OLM, more the operator registry.
Potentially. I think there is the notion that whatever declarative thing we're going to build also looks like a replacement for the database that's in that's basically like in the index images now, right? Like rather than expose an intermediate layer that does some translation, we would just remove the SQL from the equation and then do something where the cluster subsumes it somehow. I don't know, like that's some of the things that are being actively talked about on that PR. So if you're interested, you might want to take a look, but it's possible, depending on like what that long-term implementation looks like, that we could do something like on cluster OLM needs to, like the newer version of OLM needs to be able to actually like pull that file system blob down and actually do something that's very similar to how we unpack bundles
Right.
on cluster today.
So you're going to basically create a new API to be consumed by consumers other than just gRPC.
Yeah, well, so that's the gRPC thing, I think, is where there's some hiccups because we probably need to be able to have these index images work on older clusters, and there needs to be some kind of migration path.
Yes,
so I think
great.
most likely it would look what it would look like is there would be a version of that gRPC API that gets shipped with like the next several versions of the registry, and eventually we'd have some kind of deprecation. Like I said, this is not. I mean, I think this is still like sort of being discussed. That's kind of just like one option we have. But I'm just saying there is the potential that there will be cluster changes on OLM depending on how that implementation goes.
Yeah, understood. So I think I'm going to treat this as one of my highest priorities over the next week. So James, I think you and I and Joe and stuff will probably have to really take a look at this, because we would probably want to take advantage of features of this sooner than later. And I know like OpenShift, they're starting their planning for their I don't know, feature complete probably for the next release. And so I'm not sure this will even make their next release, but I guess, do you have any insight on, do you have any targets for 4.8?
Yeah, so 4.7 release is like soon. So
Yep.
This is because it's not being worked on. So obviously nothing is merged yet. So it's definitely not going to be in OpenShift 4.7. I think the current plan, like what we're attempting to look at, is a 4.8. But again, it depends on how the implementation goes and if we can get all the bits to line up.
Okay. All right. I just wasn't sure if it was in the Red Hat or the OpenShift decks as being one of those targeted things in a priority. Because if it is, we want to be able to facilitate that. So we're going to adjust our priorities to complement that.
Sure. Yeah. I'm probably not the right person to ask about those decks. But yeah, that would be my guess.
Yep. No, that's helpful. Yeah, I don't know if we need to go into all the details on it unless we have time, but I have not reviewed this yet, so it might be premature.
Yeah, well, we can, I encourage you to comment on the enhancement itself, and if there's any big issues that don't seem like they can be resolved on the enhancement, I would just bring that up in next week's working group meeting.
Yep, understood. Appreciate it.
Great. Okay, there's nothing left on the agenda, so does anybody want to introduce some last minute conversation points before we...
Yeah, I guess I have one, as usual. So our team, as we're bringing up more and more folks up on operators, every single one uses the wrong annotation for OLM skip range. They forget to capitalize the R. And I think that's all the time. So I created an issue, and I think I'm going to have, like John's on here, maybe we might prioritize that one to get fixed right away. And so I think what we want to do is that we're going to probably do a case non-sensitive compare on, we're going to submit a PR, and I'm going to propose that we do a case non-sensitive compare for all annotations that OLM cares about, namely this one. And if the case doesn't match, then we're going to fail the OPM add call, because that is something it's really, really hard to understand what's not going on, because it's just ignored, right? If you have a case problem. And this is the very first bug I ran into like a year ago, and it took me 3 weeks to figure out what was going on.
Can I make a suggestion of where that code
Absolutely.
would go? So we have in our API project a high level sort of linter validation thing.
Yep.
I would put it in there because I believe I need to check on this. I believe that the registry, when you use like OPM index add or OPM registry add, should just call that against the bundle content. And then at the same time, the operator SDK also has a version of that that's vetted in that like you can test your bundle out of band of actually adding it to an index.
Okay. John, you paying attention? You're probably going to be the guy doing this.
Yeah, I think if you go into package and then validation, it's in this project. There should be stuff that does some very similar things to that. I think that's a good example of something that we could add to that project.
Yeah, I don't think we should be real clever and try to blacklist anything that starts with OLM and stuff like that, where they might have other annotations, because there might be future annotations that you'd want to be able to ignore. because the OPM version doesn't support it and things like that. So we probably want to be narrow on some of the obvious ones. Case sensitivity is the easy one. Yep.
Boom.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that up because I think this is a good getting started one for us to do because it's probably pretty easy.
Yeah, and the great thing about the API repo is that we can merge PRs in there whenever we want. So please do. Cool. Okay. Anything else?
One thing I wanted to mention really quick, if there's still time.
Yep.
Which there is. We have been talking about improving the RFE and enhancement process, and having some more rules about, you know, how do you kick one off? What review meetings do we have? And so on. And so this is something that Ben is working on. Ben Luddy is working on. But my expectation is that we'll have something up to review probably by the next call. And hopefully that makes some of these other conversations on things like declarative index enhancement a little more clear, because we'll be bringing it up regularly and having timelines and a standard like kickoff meeting for a new enhancement or something like that, so that we can get more feedback early and more in the open.
That's great. Okay. Anybody else want to add anything? All right. If there's nothing else to add to the agenda, we'll conclude the meeting. Thanks for attending, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.